Romeo Music is the leader in audio, video, music, and lighting technology for educators. With a combined nearly 200 years of experience, Romeo Music's subject matter experts understand the struggles that face teachers in today's music classrooms. With a laser focus on educational technology, Romeo Music provides a turnkey solution, everything from audio cables to on-site training. To learn more, visit www.romeomusic.net.
Hello, and welcome to Bandstand, the official podcast of the Tennessee Bandmasters Association. I'm your host, David Aydelott, and I hope you'll join us on a journey through the past, present, and future of bands in Tennessee. We'll delve into the rich history of Tennessee bands, uncovering the hidden gems and legendary figures who shaped the state's band landscape. We'll survey the present, where you'll meet the movers and shakers of today, gaining insights from their expertise and experiences. And we'll gaze towards the future, exploring the exciting possibilities that await Tennessee's school bands. Hello, everybody. This is David Aydelott. As we go into next month and we begin to set our sights on the TBA conference in April, we're going to do a series of episodes, some conference preview episodes. The content will be the new inductees into the TBA Hall of Fame, Dr. Nola Jones and Ron Rogers. We're also going to talk today with Perry Elliott, who is the esteemed band director from Elizabethton, who essentially founded the Hall of Fame, who is responsible in very large part for this TBA Hall of Fame that we celebrate every year. So, hope you enjoy, and see you in April. So, all right. So, Perry, just tell us, first of all, before we get into the Hall of Fame topic, just tell us about you. Tell us about you and your career and the Betsy Band. Let's hear your story.
Well, I graduated 100 years ago, and I worked in Knoxville for 5 years, and that was a transformative time in my life. Jack Cannell hired me, who is in the Band Director Hall of Fame. And on Mondays, I worked with Bill Cannell. On Tuesday, I worked with Norman Woodall. On Wednesday, I worked with Dwight Christian, who's another Hall of Fame. Yep. And on Thursdays, I worked with John Abel. And then on Fridays, I went back and worked with Bill Cannell. I wasn't married, so whenever Jack Cannell was bored, he would call and say, "Hey, let's go have dinner." And so I left Knoxville, and then I was in Dalton, Georgia for a year. Seemed like 10, but just one. Then I was the band director in Irwin, Tennessee, a small school up in Northeast Tennessee for 2. And then Tyler Fleming, he was the band director of Dobbins Bennett, called and asked if I could come over and be his assistant. And so then after that, I was offered the band director's job at Elizabethton High School. Then I stayed at Elizabethton for 31 years. And so we had some moderate success there. And but the most important thing is, this is hokey as this sounds, it's actually very true. Our philosophy was, we're not building a good band, we're building good people, and the byproduct is a good band. And that was our philosophy. And so I was very, very happy at Elizabethton. And to be perfectly honest, I retired for 2 reasons. Number one, my wife had been very, very patient. And I thought it was time for her to not have to be quite so patient. And I could dedicate some of my life to her. And number two, it was time for the band at Elizabethton to have somebody that they could relate to. I was just too old. And, it's really bad when the band students think of you as their grandfather. And so it was just time to retire. And so I had some moderate success through the years. But so that's basically my career in a nutshell. And
I think you're being modest on this moderate success business.
Well, I had a good friend. His name was Mac Bowman. He was the band director in Knoxville for a few years. And he said, "You're the best band director that nobody's ever heard of." So I always liked that line. I thought that was a great line.
I mean, that is a serious topic, though. The number of people that you may be standing behind in the grocery store line that could be an incredibly remarkable person, a noble work ethic, that you have no idea. There's not a flashing sign saying you're next to a remarkable person.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't make them any less remarkable.
Oh, I agree with that 100%. I know this sounds very, very corny, but I'm a very corny person. One of my students is a guy named Justin Stanton, and he's won 4 not Academy Awards, Grammys. He's won 4 Grammys. He's a keyboardist and trumpet player with a jazz band called Snarky Puppy. And of course, I'm very, very proud of that. That's unbelievably proud. But I'm also just as proud to say that I'm walking down the street at the Elizabethton Christmas Parade, and a student of mine hollers out, "Hey, Mr. Elliott, here's my child. He's going to be in the band too." And so I'm just as proud. I was just as proud of that.
I just got chills listening to that. Actually, I saw a video. It's Justin, right?
Yeah.
I saw a video with him the other day where he somebody played a pop song for him.
Yep.
And they removed everything except for the melody and the drums, and then he just filled in everything else with sort of Snarky Puppy-ish kind of harmonics and textures. It was incredible, just his creativity and how he put all that together.
Well, a funny story is we were working on I loved Holsinger. I just loved Holsinger. I thought he was the greatest. And so he has all those multimeter things. And so we were having class one day, and Justin raised his hand, and I said, "Yeah, man, what?" And he said, "You're teaching that wrong." He was a sophomore. And I said, "Hey, man, I'm not saying I'm right, but I said, in this case, I think I am." And so we played for a while, and he raised his hand. I said, "Yeah, what?" And he said, "Seriously, you're teaching that wrong." And I said, "Well, let's just go with it for right now." And so another 5 minutes went by. He said, "Hey, I got to tell you, you're doing that wrong." And my assistant band director, not my assistant, he was the middle school guy. He called Justin in the office, and I saw him pointing his finger, and he came back out and sat down and raised his hand. I said, "Yeah, man, what is it?" And he said, "I was wrong on that." I said, "Yeah, that's okay. I'm wrong 90% of the time, so don't worry about it." So that's one of my favorite stories. Pat Metheny wrote this piece, and it's terrible. It's god-awful. And he wrote it for his high school band director.
I know this piece, yes.
Yeah, who was terrible.
Forward March, I think it's called Forward March, something like that.
And my only hope is Justin Stanton never writes a piece about me. So that's my only hope. So, but anyway, that's my story
hilarious.
On him.
What's the nickname? It's the Betsy Band. When did it start? What's the significance? What do people outside of Elizabethton need to know about it?
Well, this is an awesome story, as it is in many, many small towns. The Elizabethton High School Band was started by a music man. His name was Stafford. He was the trombone player in the John Philip Sousa Band. He was a roadman. He came to town. He sold the instruments, sold the band uniforms, just exactly like the Broadway musical, just exactly. But he fell in love with Elizabethton. All of those music men would stay for a while, get it started. Then the town was supposed to hire a band director. Well, he stayed. And so he was the one that gave the band the nickname, because Betsy is a derivative of the word Elizabeth. Mm-hmm. And so Elizabethton, so the draw became Betsy. And then also John Severe's wife from Tennessee History, her name was Betsy. And so anyway, that's where the Betsy Band came from. It's a derivative of the word Elizabeth. So that's where it came from. But
that's great.
If you go to the town hall of Elizabethton, there's a picture there of a city band. I mean, it's in the glass cabinets downtown. And if you go to every annual from Elizabethton High School, and they go back to the early 30s, there's a picture of the Elizabethton band in every one of those annuals. And so the band was just absolutely steeped in history, and it was just, and to be honest, this is very, very cool. From the time the first band ever was back in the early 30s to the day I was hired, there was only 9 band directors. And of those 9 band directors, one of them was a temporary, and he went back to the middle school, and 2 of them stayed 1 year. So there were 6 band directors basically from 1930 something to whenever I left, whenever that was. And so Jonathan Valentine, who's doing a fabulous job, he's actually the 10th band director.
That's an episode we're going to do at some point. Actually, it'll be a series of episodes just on the old bands in Tennessee. Christian Brothers, I think, is the oldest band in the country.
Wow.
As I understand it. They were the first school band in the country, as I understand it. Also, I believe, I could be speaking out of turn, I believe also started by a music store representative.
The Irwin Band, Unicoi County, that was also started by a music man. And this is a very cool story. I was the band director there. And so I was cleaning out the trophy cabinet, and there's a concert plaque. And it's the West Tennessee Concert Festival in Memphis, Tennessee. And I'm going, how did the Irwin Band, which is in the very top corner, go to Memphis? And so I went to who was the principal back 100 years ago. His name was Mr. Price. And I said, how did this happen, Mr. Price? And he said, Wilkes Bobbitt went to the owner of the railroad in Irwin, and that railroad went north and south. And he had him go to the executive of the Southern Railroad, which went east and west, and they traded a load. And so they took the the Irwin Band from Johnson City to Memphis for concert festival, and they took a load of whatever from north to south. I thought that was an awesome story. I thought that was
That's
really
incredible.
Awesome.
I was going to say, how did they make it? It wouldn't have been easy.
No.
Before,
so they took trains.
That's before interstates.
Southern had passenger cars. So isn't that a cool story that they traded?
I love it.
The 2 corporations traded. One took a load and one took the band. That's one of my favorite stories.
That's a great story. Okay, you mentioned some of giants of the past that you worked with when you were starting. Who are your mentors? I always like to ask this question because somebody like you, Perry, who's so esteemed, I know you're trying to be modest, but you're so esteemed, knowing who you looked up to is huge for young teachers now as they're beginning their careers.
Well, Jack Cannell, who was the John Wayne of band directors, Jack Cannell was just, if you did everything Jack said, this is my take on Jack Cannell, you wouldn't always be right, but you'd never be wrong. Jack Cannell was just, he was phenomenal. I literally, I was a pretty good conductor. I really was. But after working with Jack Cannell for 5 years, if you didn't know how to subdivide, you were clueless, because he was the master of taking, he could take adagio for strings and subdivide it so that every kid, the strongest kid to the weakest kid, would know where every part of the beat was. And he was just a master. And so Jack Cannell was great. One of my close friends, and I'm always surprised that he's not in the Band Directors Hall of Fame, was Norman Woodall. And there's so many hilarious stories about Norman. And Norman and I would always have breakfast together at Allstate. We always operated we never arranged to have breakfast. We just were always on the same schedule. And of course, anybody that knows me knows I can be very abrasive, and I can be very straightforward. And I'd be sitting there at the table and I'd go, look at that band director over there. That guy's so dumb. And Norman would go, Perry, I think you're too harsh. And so Norman Woodall was awesome. Bill Cannell was awesome. Dwight Christian, he's in the Band Directors Hall of Fame, but he really and truly doesn't get the credit that he deserves. He was really a phenomenal band director. I asked him to cover and listen to my group when I was getting ready for festival. The first time I went to festival, and Dwight said, "Well, the first thing you're doing is you've got the band seated the wrong way." And I didn't know. I mean, you're dumber than a coal bucket. And so I said, "Well, what would you do?" And he walked over and set it up, and he said, "Now this is why the French horns play into the trombones, the bass clarinets become part of a woodwind choir, the trumpets are playing into the back of the, it was." And guess how my band was set up the last day I did rehearsal? Just like that. Because I had a master band director tell me how to do it, and why would I reinvent the wheel? So they were fantastic. There were a lot of band directors that I enjoyed working with a great deal. A band director that a lot of people in Tennessee might know, in East Tennessee, his name is Jim McClure. He was an exceptionally good band director. We worked together. Then I enjoyed working with Tyler Fleming a great deal. But I'm going to tell you, the greatest band directors I worked with were, let me think for just a second so I don't miss him, David Dixon, Chris Lockhart, Rick Simmerly, Charlie Heron, Joel Tilson. Those were all the middle school band directors that fed the high school. And if you don't think that's your life, you're sadly mistaken. Those guys made me look good every single time, because you can be John Philip Sousa, but if you don't have the correct student sitting in that chair, it doesn't matter. So they had a huge influence in my life. Those middle school guys that, in high school, we're always thinking, oh, what piece can we play at festival this year? And middle school directors are going, man, if I don't have 5 minutes to go to the bathroom, I'm going to die, because they never get a break. It's class after class after class. And so they were huge influences on me for sure. But Jack Cannell, he was something special.
Okay. So what motivated you to initiate this push for a Hall of Fame in Tennessee?
Well, I know this is going to be hard to believe, but early on, and Joanne and Cole and all those guys, they could disagree with me, but early on, TBA was having a little bit of a hard time finding their path. They were an organization really without a true mission. You'd find it impossible to believe now when you look at the Sweepstakes Award and the Solo and Ensemble and the educational series that you go through in the Hall of Fame, and you look at the TBA now, and it's a star-studded organization with members that are known nationally. But at one point in time, it was a little bit of an organization that not lost, but didn't quite have its footing. And so I was at a clinic at Appalachian State University, and another Hall of Fame member, Ron Rogers, was there. And they came, there was a knock at the door, and a student worker stuck their hand and said, "There's a phone call for Mr. Elliott." And so I immediately panicked, because, there had to be something wrong, because, I was at a band director's clinic, and so I went to the phone and I answered it, and it was an executive board member of the Tennessee Band Directors Association. And they said that I had been selected to bring the Elizabethton band to perform at the TMEA. And to say I was puzzled was beyond comprehension, because first of all, I'd never submitted a tape to perform. And so I said, well, I'll have to check with my principal. Blah, blah, blah. But actually I was thinking, man, don't commit to something that you don't know that you're capable of doing. So that night I ran it by Ron Rogers, and he said, man, you got to do that. And so I committed the whole year, and, it was the most important thing in my life. Well, unbeknownst to me, it wasn't a real concert, because back in the late 90s, TBA didn't sponsor a concert. They had a meeting, And at that meeting, they could do whatever they wanted. Well, they had picked for a band to play because at that time, TBA was trying to get more band involvement.
Mm-hmm.
And so I spoke to the executive board members and they said, well, we're just going to warn you, your crowd's not going to be very good. And which now you go, what? The crowd's not going to be very good. But they said the last time we just didn't have hardly anybody there. So I called a couple of people. I called a guy named John Culverhouse, and he's a famous band director in East Tennessee. He's a member of the Hall of Fame in East Tennessee, and he was in Georgia. And I said, I've been asked to do this concert, and they say the crowd's not going to be good. And I said, I hate to do all this and take the students down there and tell them it's a big deal and there's nobody there. He said, well, the first thing you have to do is you have to have a hook, and you need to send invitations to everybody. And I said, what do you mean? He said, go get invitations printed, get the times put on it, and put your hook on it. And I said, well, what's the hook? And he said, well, man, I'm not going to tell you how to run your band. You got to figure that out on your own. So I thought, okay. So that happened to be the bicentennial year of the state of Tennessee. So Elizabethton is a great band, but it's a small time band. I mean, so I came up with this idea that we would commission a work. So, of course, I wasn't going to go to somebody and say, hey, I want to commission a work. So I went to the guy that had been the band director at Elizabethton High School. His name was Bill Scott, and he did all of our arrangements. And I asked Bill, I said, I'd like to do a chart called, that song, She's Gone Away, He's Gone Away. And he said, that folk tune. And I said, yeah. And I said, I'd like to do a folk tune and call it a bicentennial ballad. And so he did that bicentennial ballad for us, and it's based on that, he's gone away for to stay a little while. And so then at the end, I said, hey, why don't you go ahead and conduct it? And so he conducted it. So that was the thing. Well, when it turned out, the crowd was, well, first of all, they put us in a room that was suitable for a percussion ensemble because they really and truly thought the crowd would be terrible. Well, by the time the concert started, it was standing room only. Every seat was taken. And I had taken my second band just to ensure there was a crowd. And so I pulled those out of the seats and got real people in the seat. And the concert was great, and we had a great time. And it was life-changing for me. And, it was the greatest thing in the world. Well, the next year I went, and it was okay, but it didn't have the same effect. And I thought, man, the concert needs a hook. I don't know what it is, but the concert needs a hook. So I went to the TBA meeting that year, and for the 999th time, it was brought up that there had to be a Hall of Fame for band directors. And so I had already had this conversation with Jenny D'Andrea, who was the band director. And I said, I'm going to ask to be put in charge of a committee to be in charge of putting together a Hall of Fame. And she said, great. Who do you want on the committee? I said, nobody. And so that day she said, they were talking about the Hall of Fame. And she said, I've decided to appoint a committee today of Perry Elliott. And so somebody said, I'll be glad to serve on it. And Jenny said, well, the committee's Perry Elliott. Because this is what I had found. Because of the diversity of the geographic region, nobody could ever get together. There was no such thing as a Zoom call or anything like that. And so I just made a bunch of phone calls and put together a proposal. And the next year I brought it, and everybody went, well, this is too simple. It will never work. And so we read through it. The next year we brought it back, and they voted for it. And so basically, the format's pretty much the same as it was. I didn't want it to be an exclusive thing where you said, it has to be 67%. It was a simple majority. So if there were 49 votes for somebody and 50 against, they're not in. But if there was 54 and 49 against, they would be. So I honestly, it was never anything but acclamation, because nobody ever had nominated anybody that didn't deserve to be there. I had a couple of stipulations. And the first stipulation I had was you had to have the packet complete before it could be even presented. because this is what I also found about band directors. Hey, I'll send you that next week. And next week, of course, never comes. And so I stood my ground on that. And so I cannot tell you how many times people would come to me and say, hey, I would like to nominate John Smith today. And I'd say, great, you have your packet? And they'd go, no, I'll get that to you next week. And I said, then you can't do it. And they'd go, but, and I go, it's in the rules. I have to have the complete packet. I have to have the photographs. I have to have everything. And they would look at me and they say, I can't believe you're being this way. And I said, and I would always say to them, I can't believe that you want to nominate somebody and you don't want to do it right. And so I really stood my ground on that. And so to me, that was and when I told the guys, when they took over, I said, don't deviate from that. Stay your ground on that, because you have to make people do it. Now, there was some lean times because band directors are always getting ready for festival, always getting ready for the next concert. And so that gets pushed to the back of their mind. So I would call people and I'd say, didn't you tell me? And they'd go, yeah. And I go, is it done? And they would go, well, no, I haven't had time. So that band director doesn't mean that much to you. Oh, he does. And I go, well, then I expect to see that packet on my desk in a week. And so I would push people. And one of our colleagues had asked me to do that. And I said, I'll tell you what, I'll call you Monday and remind you. And I call that band director every Monday for month after month after month after month. And they got their paper in the next time. And so what I had envisioned was something that would be a great reward for those band directors that had given their life. Now, the people that get the award now, I mean, they're famous people, but at the very, very beginning, they were just great band directors. But we look at some of the names now and they're nationally known and all this stuff. And I think I still think a lot of the band directors that deserve to be in there have fallen through the crack. And, but, if people don't choose to nominate them, people don't choose to nominate them. You can't force people to do it. So anyway, that's what I had envisioned. So I go back to my original story about the concert. So I said to myself, what we can do is we can turn that TBA meeting that had a band playing at it and change the whole concept to the Hall of Fame concert with the induction ceremony. And there was the hook. Mm-hmm. And so for years, and I don't know how it is now, but for years, that became the most well-attended concert. It was at a good time. It had an emotional hook to it. There were family members there. There were band directors who would come and say, that was my band director. The crowd was awesome. And I cannot tell you how many times that literally, I can't remember the band that played that day, but they played Seal Lullaby. I don't know if you know that, tease. I was moved to tears because it was an emotional day anyway, and their performance of it was just beautiful. And I literally sat there and I cried because I said, band directors know how to communicate with not a single word. And it was just such a special day. And when Cleveland played the piece, and I can't remember the name of it now, and it was about Columbine. And there were just so many special moments. And so you had that hook of the induction ceremony. And then I had this idea, and I thought it would be really cool if we had a fanfare that would introduce it. And so I went to my arranger, Bill Scott, and I said, Bill, would you write me a tune? And he said, no. And I said, why? And he said, I can orchestrate and I can arrange, but I can't compose. And I said, well, if I wrote it, would you orchestrate it? And he said, sure. And so every day, and I know I've got to be the stupidest person in the world, but every day I would walk my dog And every day I would sing through what I thought would be a cool little melody. And when I was composing it in my mind, I said, it has to be able to be played by 7th and 8th graders. And it has to be able to be played in such a way that a Midwest caliber band can enjoy playing it too. But it has to be that level of, beginning to difficult. And so I worked on that and worked on that and worked on that. And I would get with Bill and I'd say, and this is what I want. This is how I'd be. And so that's how I came up with that. And so when I did the initial presentation and I said, and we will start it with that, I wanted it to be, I just had envisioned the announcer would be doing, ladies and gentlemen, this morning we salute the giants of the past while they dum-ba-dum-bum, dum-ba-dum-bum. And I just thought it would give it a sense of grandeur as opposed to just going, now we're going to talk about the people that got the, and so it was just, I just wanted to have a moment of grandeur to it. And so my whole concept behind this was that I wanted it to be the concert that everybody came to, that it had this emotional thing, that it had this event feeling to it. And I like I say, I haven't been in a long time, but I'm sure the guys have done a fabulous job with it. But I never came away from that concert not saying families were moved today, directors were moved today. When the concert was over, people would flock to those people that were enshrined, and they would talk to them. And then the next thing they do, I saw this time and time again, relatives of band directors who had passed would walk up to the band and thank them.
It gets me every time.
Oh, my heart.
Same.
I'm in tears right now. It was just everything. And of course, band kids are the best. I mean, they may be sitting there going, do I have to sit here and listen to one more old person? But they would sit there and they would go, to almost a band, the kids would listen and they'd go, thank you. And it was just the perfect elements to me. We had the first Hall of Fame concert. Nobody knows this. The Elizabethton band played. We called it the introduction concert. It was called the inaugural concert is what we called it. And so what I tried to do is every piece I played was a first. I played Overture for Band, which was the first piece that was commissioned by Ronald Jenkins. And the last piece I played was Holsinger's Prelude and Rondo, which was the first piece he ever wrote. And so every piece I applied to play was a first. And so this was the first concert. And I'll tell you how it's changed. That concert was not even in the program. It wasn't even in the program. It was just listed as TBA meeting. And so I'm assuming
that's
now
not the same anymore.
That the TBA concert is entitled Hall of Fame concert. And every time I went, the crowds were huge. There was such an emotional impact. And I'm not taking credit for it. I mean, don't misunderstand. But to me, it was one of the first landmark things that TBA did. It was something that, and then after that, ETSBOE, the East Tennessee School, they did their Hall of Fame. And I don't know about the other ones, but I know it began a little bit of a thing. And then it was soon after that the sweepstakes. And then it was soon after that the solo and ensemble. And then it was soon after that the educational things. And then TBA was a legitimate power in the state of Tennessee and had gone from, and I don't mean a fringe, that's not what I mean, but gone from another organization to the organization.
Yeah.
So it was something that I was very compassionate about. And I would spend hours writing those introductions because I wanted them to have just the right emotion to them. And I want him to have just a little bit of humor, and I want him to have just a little bit of heart tug. And I would spend hours and hours writing those. And it was so exciting to send that letter to that surviving family member and say your father or your husband is going to be recognized. And then they had to call me, and I'd say, "Oh, this is going to be awesome. You're not going to believe how everybody's looking forward to this." And I remember Tom Hughley, who I don't think you would know. He owned a music store in Knoxville.
Oh yeah,
and
I do. I'm from down close to Columbia.
Okay.
So.
Well, right. Well, then you would know. Then one of his sons, he after the concert was over, he was crying and he was going, "This is the greatest honor for my father." And it was just, to me, it was so important to me that when that day ended, and I know this is, as I said, I'm pretty hokey. I would have rather had that event go right, and I think they always did. I would rather that event been right than to get the Settler Shield. And guess what? I never got the Settler Shield. So, I mean, it was just that important to me. And and it's just something that, it's something I'm real proud of. I mean, I gave every aspect of that, every thought that I could as to the certificate instead of a plaque, because plaques get thrown in a thing, but a certificate can be framed how you want it to be.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that was my philosophy on that. Where it was in the program, the fanfare, how it was introduced. I mean, every aspect of it. And I love to read that and then step out of the way and have the president step up and stick out the hand and shake it and make that presentation. It was just, it was every time we did that, I would get in my car and drive home and say, that was a great day for my life. It was just, it meant that much to me. And I know it sounds pretty wacky that it was that important to me, but it really was that important to me.
No, sir. No, we need more of that. I think we get so, smarty pants sometimes that we forget that what we're trying to do is use music to teach kids to be wonderful people. And that's the core. And we can do whatever, and there can be journals and research articles and all this stuff. That's fine, whatever. But at its core, it's a human activity. And what you've done is create an event that echoes. You started the ripples, and the ripples keep going. And, Michael and Jacob are doing a great job.
Well, that's another story. I made the announcement at the TBA meeting that I wasn't going to be doing it anytime. And so they approached me and they laid out their case, and I said, "Great, you guys can do it." And so everybody's going, "What do you mean they can do it?" And I said, they were the only ones that came to me and said they were interested in doing it. And they said, "Well, we were going to appoint a committee." And I said, "I've already told them they can do it."
Well, in the tradition of the Perry Elliott Committee of One, you made the right decision to just put them on. What are the requirements to be initiated into the Hall of Fame or inducted into the Hall of Fame?
There aren't really any. It is the voting, the pure and simple majority vote of the TBA. And so I specifically did that because there could be, and I say this, and this sounds weird, but there could be a band director at a very small school that never won a marching band contest, never got a superior rating, never was in a national publication, and nobody knew his name, could have been the best band director in the world. And he couldn't be blamed because he had bad instrumentation, because the school system was not supportive of him. But at the same time, you could have somebody that performs at Midwest, that was first place at a Bands of America competition, had all-state players every year, and they both could be qualified to be in the Hall of Fame as far as I was concerned, because accomplishments and checking a box don't always mean that they have been the greatest band director in the world. And so there are a lot of band directors that I think have fallen through the cracks that were fabulous band directors that were Hall of Fame, and they don't check that box. So I purposely didn't say you have to do this. I said you have to have a photograph, you have to have a bio, and then it's voted on by the TBA. And that's why I specifically said by a simple majority, because you could be the greatest band director in the world that nobody knows, and 50 people do know who you are, and they should be in the Hall of Fame. And, you know, just because your resume doesn't glow with national accolades doesn't mean that your child didn't end up being the president of the United States and funded all the military bands because band had meant so much to him. So there really is no criteria. It has to be the judgment of the Tennessee Bandmasters Association. And what better judgment than your peers to determine whether you should be in the Hall of Fame or not?
It's hard to. It's a special event for everyone involved. Do you have any? I don't know the last time you were there, but do you have any favorite memories? I mean, obviously, when you started this thing, that's got to.
Well, I was always a nervous wreck because I wanted it to be perfect. And see, a lot of times I didn't know the people. I would read the resume and go, holy cow, how did I not know them? How in the world did I not know this person? But they were from West Tennessee, or I know this is hard to imagine now, but at one time I was a young band director, you know, and I would go, how did I know this? So they would be gone, and I would be standing there going, I hope his wife comes up to me. And she would always come up and say, oh, Perry, thank you so much. And I'd have to be going, Mrs. Smith? And she'd go, yes. And I go, oh, I knew that was you. And so I was always a nervous wreck because of that. But I probably, I don't know, it would be hard for me to say because I don't think there was a single time that I did not at some point in time choke back a tear, because I thought, somebody said to me one time, I know why you did this Hall of Fame. And I said, why? And they said, because you want to be in the Hall of Fame. And I said, let me tell you something, man. I said, if I were ever in the Hall of Fame, which I will not be, I said, I would be the answer to an ACT question. And he said, what does that mean? I said, which name does not fit? W.J. Julian, Joe T. Smith, Perry Elliott. And he laughed. And I said, see what I mean? So they all meant.
But you're arguing against yourself now because you just talked about how it shouldn't just be somebody who checks all the national boxes.
Yeah, but I know me.
You're arguing against yourself.
But I know me. So,
again, you're just being modest.
They were all really pretty special. But I think probably one that really meant a lot to me would be Dwight Christian, because Dwight Christian does not check all the boxes. But Dwight Christian is one of the best band directors that's ever been in the state of Tennessee. And I don't know that very many people know who Dwight Christian is, but I can tell you right now, there are very few people that can do this skill. Very, very few. They can stand in front of a sixth grader, can stand in front of a high school band, and can stand in front of a college band and motivate them all to do the job. And Dwight Christian's one of those people.
That's incredible.
It is.
And we were fortunate at Franklin to play the concert where he was inducted.
Oh, awesome.
And we played Seal Lullaby.
You are lying to me.
I don't know that we're the only band that's played Seal Lullaby, but we played Seal Lullaby.
If I was there, then you were the one. And I'm going to tell you, man, I could not.
Well, we actually were part of the commission, Perry. We were part of the consortium to have it transcribed from the original choir into the band setting.
I could not stop crying that day. I could not stop crying. And I will tell you what I did on Monday. I'll tell you what I did on Monday. I called J.W. Pepper and I ordered that. Now, by the way, we never played it that good. But you're kidding me.
It's true. And the great thing is I had a wonderful student teacher and I let him conduct it.
Well, it was a great day.
So,
that was a great day. That was a great performance.
Shout out to Tyler Dietrich. He's at Independence High School now in Middle Tennessee. Yep. Well, that was a great memory.
That is quite a coincidence that piece of music was so burnt in my mind. And I was sitting on the front row, and I can't remember who's sitting beside me. It was a non-band director person. And I kept thinking to myself, they are thinking this man is totally insane, but I could not stop crying. It was an emotional day, and it was a wonderful performance. And I thought all the performances were very good of every band that was ever there. And, some of the band directors that would talk were a little bit long-winded. And I used to think, at first I think they need to keep it shorter. But then I thought, Frank Sinatra, the last time he was on the Grammys, he was talking and they cut away from a commercial. And I thought, cutting away from Frank Sinatra to show a baby food commercial, and the next year he was dead. And I thought, wow, what a waste. But I mean, after that, I'd said, they should be able to say whatever they want to say.
One of the reasons for starting this podcast was to create connections amongst the band folks in Tennessee, directors, students, parents. Right. And so speaking to that, would you have any response to that? You mentioned earlier that we are a little bit segmented geographically. Mm-hmm. Is there a way to fix that?
Yeah, everything has to be personal. If I were going to try to make a connection more, I would do less band director talk and more student talk. And make that a buzz with them, and say the student leader from Franklin High School is talking today, or there's going to be a talk between Siegel, three students, one from Science Hill High School, one from Siegel High School, and one from Christian Brothers High School. And they're going to be talking about how music impacts them, and get it where they're talking about it on social media, where, the biggest problem with politics today, I follow politics like there's nobody's business. I'm almost old enough to run for president now. But, is that with politics, everybody feels removed. And so if you could make these podcasts not about the band director, but about how the student is affected by this, and how it impacts their life, and how it's going to, and I'm not talking about the kid that is first chair clarinet player all the time, although right. There's nothing wrong with that. But I mean, past students, recently that are just graduating, younger students, older students, where there would be more of a forum where they would talk, and then a forum where you would have parents talk, perhaps not crazy ones, but where parents would talk and say, a great forum would be a parent that was in the band, that their child was in the band, and how they saw band when they were there, and how they see band now through their child's eyes. Because I cannot tell you how many students at Elizabethton, they would say, I went home and told my mom how mean you were. And I'd go, yeah, okay. What did they say? They said, shut up. You were a lot meaner to them. And I always would laugh. And they would tell me that story because they wanted to be able to say, Mom said, shut up, that you were meaner to her. And so it was a joke to them too. And so that would be something where you get parents involved.
No, I think it's good because there's institutional knowledge that needs to be shared across the state. And there are great young teachers that, like, we had a young band director on last month. Her name is Reese Gardner Herring. She's the band director at Arlington Middle School over in Memphis, in the Memphis area. She's dynamite. She's in her 5th year. She's doing a great job. And people in East Tennessee need to know about her
Yes.
because she's going to be a mover and a shaker. Actually, she already is. She's doing a really great job. And so I think there's an opportunity through this venue to help those kind of things happen. Publicize people that are doing a great job. What would you say, Perry, to the young band directors in Tennessee?
What would I say to the young band directors at Tennessee? Quit trying to reinvent the wheel. There is somebody that has already done this. You just have to ask until you find somebody that's done it. And you don't have to be a prodigy. It is perfectly okay not to know the answer. Because I think so many of them today think if I let somebody know that I don't know something, then they're going to think less of me. I can tell you right now, an older band director will think more of you if you will say, how did you do that? How do I get my trumpets to play in tune in a muted section? Make sure you have matched mutes. They're spending all this time tuning and it's just using a matched mute. And what I would say to them is start asking a question. And what you will do is you will endear yourself to an older band director. And then all of a sudden at the meetings, the older band director starts raising a hand and says, Johnny's the one that needs to be talking about this because I've talked to him and he knows. And the younger band directors travel in their pack and they look at the older band directors like, man, they don't even know how to use the cell phone. And in my case, I didn't. But I mean, I would call band directors all the time and say, what is the difference between a cornet part and a trumpet part? What is the difference? What are they talking about right there when you're talking about this versus that? And go, is that important? And I cannot tell you how many times those guys saved my life. I mean, I would go back in the next day and I would say, well, blah, 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 blah. And the kids go, oh, he's so smart. And I'd go, thank God I called Jack Cannell last night. I mean, an older band director begins to bond with somebody that has some interest in what they did. And it is very easy as a band director to get on an island. It is so easy. And our egos, people would say all the time, and you'd have to know me, but people would say all the time, hey, you saw my band, right? Yeah. And they'd say, what do you think? And I say, do you want to know, or do you want me to tell you how good they are?
Mm-hmm. And
they say, I really want to know. And I'd say, okay. Or they say, what do you mean? I go, they were great, man. And so, I would just ask, I tell younger band directors, ask every older band director in the world. You can always walk away and go, I got to know what he's talking about. But you never know. There might be an Easter egg in there that's worth finding.
Yes.
Well, this has been an hour of your life you will not get back. And
that's not true. I've enjoyed this very much. It's been great. Do you have anything else you want to say about Hall of Fame that we missed?
No, except to say this. I said this when they gave me the plaque. There's a movie that's really interesting. It's called Equalizer 3, and I like it because everybody in the world that's bad gets killed. Because we as Americans, we love violence and guns and stuff like that. And so there's a line in it where the doctor says to Denzel Washington, are you a good man? And he says, I don't know. And only a good man says, I don't know. What I would say about the Band Directors Hall of Fame is the band directors that are really good, if you ask them if they're good, 99% of the time they say no. And so the Band Director Hall of Fame justifies those people.
That's really well said. I gotta have you on more, Perry. This has been great.
Oh, well,
you have the gift of gab.
I do. My wife tells me all
really
the time
do.
I should run for political office, and I said I have.
No, you need to start a podcast. I'll help you.
Oh,
thank you so much, Perry. This has been wonderful. I've gotten at least chills 3 or 4 times during this conversation.
Once again, I'm flattered that you'd ask, and I take a tremendous amount of pride in the event. I know the boys have done a fabulous job following through with it. When somebody wants to do something, that's generally where you do.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
it has been, it was really something special. And I was going through the names today, and I was going, wow, there's a lot of good people on that list.
And you made it happen.
Well, good.
Thanks for listening to Bandstand. If you have topic suggestions or need to get in touch with us, email us at tbabandstandpodcast@gmail.com. Your input is important to us, and if you have a topic you'd like us to discuss about the past, present, or future of Tennessee bands, please let us know. Again, that email is tbabandstandpodcast@gmail.com. Right now we're broadcasting on Spotify and YouTube, so please subscribe, review, and rate. Box 5, please. And more importantly, share this podcast with your friends. See you next week.